What a beautiful day, you guys. Good morning. Great to see you this morning. Glad to be here with you every week. Today, I want to invite you to open a Bible to Psalm 34. That's where we're going to be this morning. Next week, we're going to begin a new series walking through the book of Colossians. That'll kind of take us up to summertime. I'm really looking forward to that. We're just going to kind of stare at Jesus together through the book of Colossians and see how he is supreme in our lives. And so the series will be called All of Life is All for Jesus, and just seeing how his rule in our lives shapes every area. So I'm excited about that. But this morning, we're finishing up our series in the Psalms called The Problem of Pain, just looking at how the Psalms really express for us these various symptomatic emotions that when we face different things in our life, different forms of suffering or pain, it manifests itself in grief, in anger, as we saw a couple weeks ago, in anxiety and doubt. And today we're looking at one I think that in many ways encompasses all of us, and it's looking at something and how we often cope with pain, and that is addiction, through addiction. Before we go any further, I just want to give you a quick recommendation. I don't do this often, but if this is an area of your life that you're just stuck, or maybe you have a loved one and you're like, I want to delve deeper into that, there is a book I'd recommend for you. It's a book by Ed Welch called Addictions, A Banquet in the Grave. It's finding hope in the power of the gospel. And so I really do hope that you would check something like this out. There's also some pamphlets at the Resource Center in the lobby that we've put out for you that relate to various areas of your life just to kind of get you going in the right direction. But there's one out there on kind of the cycles of addiction as well that I hope you take advantage of. But this morning, as we look at Psalm 34, we're looking at this idea of coping, this idea of running to something to save us, to deliver us, to help us in these moments of addiction. I think if you were to describe what addiction is or what an addict feels like, you might resonate with it more than you realize, maybe. Because an addict just feels as if they are trapped. An addict feels like they're out of control. An addict feels like they are desperate. They have a hunger and a thirst that they are wanting to have satisfied. They feel like there's something they cannot let go of, right? They feel like there's something that they're stuck in. They often feel without hope of freedom or escape. You resonate with that? I don't know about you, but this begins at birth, these kind of coping skills. When we raised all of our kids with a pacifier, a passy. We were that family, Any moment of, just sadness or crying or whatever, we're just like, plug it up, just you're good now, which it developed an unhealthy coping, because it reaches a point with all of them that you look at them one day and you're like, that looks wrong, right? You're a little too old to be having one of those in your mouth, and so we try to help them break the habit of the passy, through various means. One of them would just be, cutting the rubber nipple down enough to where it just was no longer satisfying enough, which still I don't think worked nonetheless. But I was not a pacifier kid. I was a thumb sucker. Okay, you guys have any thumb suckers in the room, right? You feel me? That strategy of cutting the thumb down doesn't work, I can tell you that. And so my parents used a sock. We just put a sock on my hand. I think it worked. I don't suck my thumb today, at least, so maybe the sock worked. But it's this ongoing source of comfort, right? You're in a moment of fear. You're in a moment of insecurity. You got hurt. You start crying. You're scared, whatever it is. In goes the thumb. It's a source of comfort. So maybe you're not a thumb sucker. Though in some ways I would bet you're like me. We're just playing with a lot higher stakes these days than we were as a kid. Life is hard, it's painful, and since infancy, we've learned ways to cope in the midst of pain and fear. We have good things in our life that we use to cope, like relationships, friendships, community that we run to. We have knowledge. We just go, I'm going to learn something else. I'm going to learn about this thing. I'm going to try to get on top of it, or entertainment, or success, or money, or thumbs, right? Good things. And then we have destructive things, like alcohol abuse or drug abuse or pornography or greed or sex, right? I'm not saying that all addictions are equally addictive, and I'm not saying that they're equally destructive, but we all run to something, right? Hoping it'll save us. I mean, and so a lot of us, we come into this room from different places this morning. I mean, some of you know this area well in the sense that you grew up with an abusive parent, maybe an alcoholic parent. So you felt the pain from that angle. Or many of you love someone deeply who you're seeing an addiction destroy their life, right? So you're coming at it from that angle. Some of you are here and you're destroying your own life, right? You know what helplessness feels like. You know what slavery feels like. And some of you are sitting here this morning, you're like, I've never dealt with this in my life. You think, I would never be out of control like that. Or you see somebody in a destructive path and you go, they just need to make better choices. You kind of approach it that way. You're like Bob Newhart in that famous skit, where he's a counselor and he brings people into his counseling room and they sit across the desk from him and he says, this will only take 1 minute, what's your problem? And they tell him his problem and he cuts them off and he just sits there and goes, I got 2 words, I want you to write them down, stop it, right? And he just keeps saying, stop it. If you've never seen this famous skit, this is your homework this afternoon, you'll enjoy it, okay? But a lot of us view other people that way, like they just need to stop it. What's their problem? But anybody who thinks they're utterly free is probably lying to themselves. I don't know anybody who walks around thinking like, man, I'm as generous as I ever could be, or I don't wish I were more compassionate, or I wish I was more forgiving. I'm as forgiving as I can be, We all walk around just wondering, why am I so angry? I wish I wasn't so angry. I wish I wasn't so insecure around other people. I wish I wouldn't eat more than I should, or I wish I would stop purging afterwards, or I wish I wouldn't drink more than I want, or spend more than I want, or work more than I want. I mean, does anybody in here think that they're too gracious and too humble? Right? I mean, by your own admission, we are like the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 7 that says, for I do not do the good that I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. We resonate with that. We have a word for that. It's called slavery. This is why Jesus says in John chapter 8, he says, whoever sins is a slave to sin. This is how Jesus talks about this for us. So what is it that causes us to desire and to do things that we don't want to do? What leads us to destroy our lives and the lives of those that we love? What causes us to take good things and move them into the throne room of our hearts and say, this is everything to me? Well, the answer is that we've been created to have an undeniable desire to worship. I don't mean that you have an undeniable desire to come here on Sundays and sing every single week. But you have a desire that you can't rid yourself of, a desire to build your life on something else, a desire to treasure something else. You were created to be dependent on something else, someone else, that will give your life meaning and purpose. That's what worship is. And David, the psalmist, this morning gets that. This psalm is called a psalm of deliverance. It was actually written in response to a little episode that David experienced when he went to this little Philistine city of Gath. He was running from Saul, this guy who was seeking to kill him. And there he was seeking refuge, safety from his fears. But there his fears crept up again because these people discovered who David was. They were afraid that he and all of his military prowess was going to maybe start a war with them, and so they wanted to drive him away. And David, his coping mechanism was to act like he was a crazy person. And they meant, man, this guy's nuts. Get him out of here. And he was saved. And he wrote this psalm in response to his fears after he experienced rescue. And I think this speaks powerfully to us in regards to our addiction cycles of sin. And the first thing that I want us to see is found in verses 1 through 10. There's really 2 sections to this psalm. In the first section, verses 1 through 10, and what we see here is this call to taste something better. To taste something better. Read with me, beginning in verse 1 of Psalm 34. David says this. We just sang this song so beautifully. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Oh, fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. We're called to taste something better here. In other words, worship your way out of your addiction. If you notice from the start, David's in a great place, right? He's not in Gath, apparently. He's in a great place. He's on top of the world spiritually. If you see in verses 2 through 3, what does it say? He wants to bless, praise, boast, magnify, exalt God. But this isn't a private party, right? God has done something. He can't hold in his praise, and he's saying, join me. Come on with me. Let's praise him together. Let us exalt his name, all caps, together. And then look at verses 4 and 5. He adds another layer to this experience. He says, this was my experience with God. And then he turns to us and he says, it can be yours too. This is my experience. It can be yours too. What was his experience? Well, verse 4 tells you his experience was fear. Because God delivered him, he says, from all my fears. This is why he's so excited. This is why he wants to exalt in God. God delivered him from his fears. This word means horrible, painful terror. It's not like the healthy, godly kind of fear stuff. This is a worst case scenario type fear. The kind of fear that just says everything is going to go horribly wrong. I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to be shamed, right? I'm going to die. I'm going to be exposed. I'm going to be hurt. Those kinds of thoughts. But he was delivered from those fears, and now look at his experience. It's different. What does it say? He's no longer in those fears. He's radiant. See that in verse 5? He's radiant. Right, this word, it's a beautiful word. It's a word that you actually find in the book of Isaiah that describes a mother's face lighting up at the sight of her children who she thought was lost forever. Imagine being a mom of children, thinking you've lost your kids forever and living in that reality. But then you see them again. Your face lights up. Hope is restored, right? It's radiant. It's palpable. What happened? Look at verse 6. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him from his troubles. This is utter transformation. In verses 6 through 10, he's just essentially saying to you, God saved me, and he can save you too. Well, what changed? Well, yes, his circumstances changed, but what really changed in his mind? Who he feared. Who he feared. Do you see in verse 4? I had fears. I had a lot of them. They were big ones. But now, I fear God. Look at verse 7. The angel Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. He's not talking about somebody else. He is telling that could be true for you. But he's talking about his own experience again, because what just happened? God delivered him. Here he's saying the angel Lord encamps around those who fear God, right? And delivers them. What does it say in verse 9? Oh, fear the Lord, you his saints, for those who fear him have no lack. He fears God. See, guys, some things seem so powerful and big to us in our lives. We fear those things. And we have two different approaches to our fear sometimes. Sometimes we fear what something will do to us. Someone's going to hurt us. I'm going to be exposed and shamed, that kind of thing. Something's going to happen to me. I fear that thing happening to me. Other times we fear losing something. I've got to hold on to this. I can't let go of this. I can't imagine losing this. Right? It's two different kinds of fears that play into the crevices of our hearts. Fear is a worship issue, is what it is. Your struggles in life are worship issues. You've worshiped your way into this thing that has just enslaved you. And the only way out is by worshiping your way out of it. That's how this works. I'll give you a couple examples really quick. Substance abuse, right? That's like a classic addiction kind of line that we draw, right, to substance abuse. And granted, it is prevalent, it's everywhere. I imagine it affects many of you in this room today. Right? But what's happening in substance abuse? There is a desire in someone's heart that says, I want to feel good, and I want to be able to decide when I feel good. So I'm facing something that doesn't feel good. I'm scared. It's going to create anxiety in my life. It's going to be painful, whatever it is. I want to feel good. I want to feel that comfort. You're not worshiping the substance, right? You're not worshiping the painkiller or the marijuana or whatever it is, right? The alcohol. You're not worshiping that. You're worshiping comfort. I want to feel good and decide when I feel good. That's what it is. We don't trust that God is a better comfort. Or think of anger. We looked at anger a couple of weeks ago. You have a desire, if this is a struggle for you, these cycles of anger for you, you want to be in control. You want to control your world, your job, you want to control your home, you want to control some outcome in your life, and you think that getting angry will create control. And it doesn't work, does it? If it does, it's not real sort of control. Are you worshiping anger? No, you're not worshiping anger. That'd be silly, right? You're worshiping control, and you think that you should have it. Do you see how this works? You're like, I have to have this thing. I can't lose this thing. I'm afraid of this thing happening to me, so I'm going to give my life to something that I think will get me there. See, addiction is a disordered worship issue. You worship your way into this slavery, and the only way out is through worship. And this is what we see in verses 8 through 9. The psalmist equates changing what we fear to changing what we taste. Because what does it say in verse 8? Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Verse 9, oh, fear the Lord, you his saints. He's saying tasting and seeing God is good is found in fearing God. When you fear God, you are tasting his goodness. Taste God, right? Perceive, see, understand, experience. God is good. He's the ultimate good. I love ice cream, okay? I love it a lot. Love it probably too much, to be honest with you. But we love ice cream in our family, and so, we've tried all the things like a la minute and sweet rolled tacos and all the things, even Cold Stone, the chain stuff even. But this Friday, we finally went to Nicho's. Is it Nicho's? Is that how you say it, right? I was afraid I was going to say this wrong. Okay. Nicho's. Finally. I've had people be like, you should go to Nicho's. Oh, it's good, that kind of thing. And it's piqued my interest. Right? Could you imagine if you were trying to sell me on Nicho's? You've had it, you've tasted it, it's so good, and you're like, Nicho's is amazing, right? You got to get the churro with the ice cream. It's warm, it's cinnamony and sugary, right? But with the cold ice cream, the different textures, it's fantastic. And you're selling me on it, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds good. I should have some Nicho's ice cream someday. But let's say I never go down there and I never buy one. Right? My interest could be piqued. I could intellectually know if someone's like, is Nicho's good? And you're going to always say this. You're always going to say, I've heard it's good. I've heard it's good. But until you go down there and you spend the money, right? You buy the ice cream, you taste it. Finally, I could testify it is good, right? You could taste and see, you understand, you know that it's good. Do you see what I'm saying here? Some of you are fighting and battling a cycle of addiction, and you've never tasted the goodness of God. The New Testament fundamentally talks about tasting God as salvation. It's you finally coming to God, looking at the mess of sin that you're tangled up in, and you're saying, help, forgive me, free me. Jesus said in John 8, whoever sins is a slave to sin. But he also says, if the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. You got to taste him by coming to him and saying, I can't do this anymore. That's step one, but some of you have tasted the goodness of God, but you're living off of a meal that you had years ago. And you're trying to remember constantly what that is like. Or you're living off of other people tasting and telling you about how good God is, and it whets your appetite a little bit, but you're too busy running around to these quicker fixes. You're like, that tastes good right now. This tastes good right now. And God is like, come, fear me, taste me. I'm good. See, God wants you to know him. He wants you to taste his goodness. I mean, just think about our faith, you guys. Jesus in the Last Supper, when he sat before his disciples, he held up bread and wine, and he said, this bread symbolizes my body that's broken on the cross for your forgiveness. This wine symbolizes the blood that'll be shed so you can be forgiven. He doesn't say, do you got these images in your head? All right, and he puts them back in the cupboard. No, he says, taste, eat, take, experience this. Experience my work for you. He doesn't just want you to know facts about him. He wants those truths applied to your life. He doesn't just want you to study forgiveness, but to taste forgiveness. He doesn't just want you to study love, but to taste that you are loved, to not just think in a shallow way that you are justified, but to experience his embrace, to not just see that you're a child of God, but to taste and live like you're a child of God. Fearing him is tasting his goodness. You got to worship your way out by tasting something better. What does this practically mean? I think it leads into this in the second part of the psalm. We see we're supposed to run to something that's more true. Run to something more true. Look at verse 11. It says, come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life and loves many days, that he may see good? Keep your life from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears toward their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. Affliction will slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. The Lord redeems the life of his servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. So these verses here at the beginning, 11 through 14, they flow from the same emphasis we just saw. Like a wise father to his children, David says, listen to me, I will teach you this fear of the Lord. Now he's saying, learn from me here. What are you supposed to learn? Well, if you truly want to taste the goodness of God, then you must pursue good. You have to turn from the evil and pursue good. Ever since the beginning of time, ever since the Garden of Eden, you guys, the temptation has been to think that God is holding out on you. That's the temptation. But what does he say is good? That what he says is good is actually not what's best. That true life and goodness is in doing what you want, right? But isn't that what got us into this mess in the first place? So there's a movement here in verse 14. What does it say? Turn away and do good. Pursue peace. Pursue it. Run after it. There's a movement language to this. It's not just lying there hoping something changes. There is a running in our psalm here. This so often is the issue here with addiction. We don't think about the replacement language that's a part of this. We come to the bottom. We're frustrated with ourselves. We crash and burn. We finally think, I need to change. I want to change. And we think, I'm going to say no to this thing now. But we don't think about what we're saying yes to. And so we end back up in that same cycle, don't we? Let me just take an easy example, right? I mean, maybe you're somebody and you're like, man, you're watching like 4 hours of Netflix every night and you're like, I don't know if this is the best use of my time all the time. And so you come to a moment and you're like, I'm not going to do that anymore. You decide that right before you go to bed one night. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to watch 1 hour. I don't know, whatever. You wake up the next day, you feel really excited about it, and you're like, my life is going to change tonight, right? And you get to the afternoon, you've had a long day, and you're like, oh man, what am I going to do? You begin to like question your decision, right? And then you get to that moment again at the end of the day, you put the kids to bed, you do whatever it is, and then you sit down and you just stare at a TV that's not even turned on. And you're like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. What are you going to do? Right? All you've done is create a hole. You've created a vacuum. You're going to fill it with something. What are you going to do? You're going to go, I'll start tomorrow, right? Or like, oh, it's an hour tonight. That's it. That kind of thing, right? You've said no to something, but you haven't said yes to anything else. And so we end up in these same cycles. This is what happens every single time. Right? This is our dilemma. Right? If I don't have this thing in my life, how am I going to keep doing this? How am I going to socialize? Right? How am I going to get through this difficult time? How am I going to cope? Right? What am I going to do? And so David says in verse 14, do good. Look at God and trust that he knows how life works and find out, look and see what he's calling you to do with your life. How you put others ahead of yourself, how you get curious about their lives as you enter in and lay your life down for the sake of another person. As you seek him out, right? You're replacing it with something good. But there's some here that think, man, I can't even move right now. I mean, run. I feel like I'm at the bottom and I can't even move a finger. But there's an encouragement here because what does it say further down? Verse 18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves the crushed in spirit. When you're crushed, you're not that mobile, are you? This is an amazing encouragement if you're here this morning, you're at the end of your rope. If you finally hit rock bottom and you're kind of like, I don't even know why I'm here today, but I'm here. These are the times when you're in that spot where you feel like God is the farthest away. You're wondering where he is. Or you're watching somebody who is enslaved to some addiction and you're crushed by that, right? And those are the moments where you're like, God, where are you? And what is this telling you? Oh, he's closer than you could dare to dream. You're the kind of person God is near. Are you crushed this morning? Are you humiliated? Are you brokenhearted? Do you feel like you're at the bottom? God is near, but he's not just a crying shoulder for you. What does it say? He saves the crushed in spirit. He's doing something. That's when his work starts, right? He saves those. But we look at this and we go, man, I don't think this is describing me because the eyes, Lord, are toward the righteous. The face, Lord, is against those who do evil. When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears. We resonate a lot with verse 21. Affliction will slay the wicked. If you're at the bottom, you're like, I'm not the righteous. This isn't promising me salvation. This isn't telling me that I'm going to be rescued. This is saying I'm in trouble. And yeah, you are. But the good news is that this isn't ultimately talking about you, first and foremost. We have this incredible verse here in verse 20. Right before it says, many of the afflictions of the righteous. But verse 20, he keeps all his bones, not one of them is broken. Do you know what this is talking about? This is talking about Jesus. The one who was truly righteous, who was never enslaved to a cycle of addiction, but just wholeheartedly served his Father all the days of his life. And yet he goes to the cross, and he's not the one that says the eyes, Lord, are toward the righteous. No, the Father turns his face away from Jesus as he hangs on the cross. and dies. For God so loved the world, for God so loved sinners, for God so loved those enslaved to their addictions, that he sent his only son into the world to die on your behalf. He is the one whose bones were not broken. John 19 says the soldiers come up to Jesus as he's hanging on the cross, and they look at the two thieves, and they go, and it says they break the legs of the first, and they break the legs of the second. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. For these things took place that the scripture might be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. How will you get free? It's by seeing him doing that for you. And then living out verse 22, the Lord redeems the life of his servants. It's not just the people who are better than everybody else. It's the people who see Jesus hanging there and say, that was for me. Untangle this mess of my sin, Jesus. Set me free. Right? None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. It's those who are set free from serving their sin master and they start serving Jesus, the sin destroyer, who finally find freedom in these things. If you run to him and take refuge in him, you will not be condemned. This is the promise of the gospel. There is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. This is shelter language. It's coming to him being like, I'm going to hide here. There's a lot going on in this world. There's a lot of things I can't face. There's a lot of things I don't have control over. There's a lot of things that are dominating my life with fear. And we run to Jesus and we hide ourselves in him. This is the image of being a refuge. This is deliverance language, salvation language. Guys, I don't want to brag, but I saved my cat's life, okay? A few months ago. I'm a hero, I guess you could say. But there was one night where our cat, she's really dumb, and she was on the second story roof of our house. She does this a lot. And we're outside, it's dusk, and my kids go, Dad, come and check out this owl. And I've never seen an owl outside of a zoo. So we were staring at this owl across the street, and we're just admiring the magnificence of this creature. We're like, wow, this is so cool. We sat there for a bit, and then I kept doing what I was going to do. Moments later, I hear a blood-curdling scream coming from the backside of my house, and I just ran in the house, ran up to our room, ran to this back patio, and somehow I was on the second story of our house before I could blink. That's what it felt like. And as I jump up there, there is an owl about 2 feet away from our cat, about to grab the cat. Our cat's just cowering in total fear, right? I'm watching this thing happen. I try to make myself big and scary and strong, and this owl just flies off, okay? And our cat, Rosie, she runs and hides under these like solar panels as a refuge, as a shelter. And so for the next 30 minutes, I'm trying to convince her to come out. I'm trying to convince her to come to me while this owl is just staring at us, okay? Waiting for her to come out. And so I'm like, I got to stand here, right? I got to stand here and this owl's going to kill her, right? And so finally the owl gives up, flies away, and today I'm a hero, right? This is how this works. I saved her life. Many days I wonder why I ever did that, if I'm being really honest with you, but it's true. It's what happened, right? If I could talk to my cat, if my cat could understand what was going through my mind at that time, this is what I was trying to convince her of. To come out from underneath that horrible little shelter of solar panels. It's only a temporary refuge. The moment she comes out, the fears are still there, the destruction is still going to happen. All I wanted her to do was come to me. She could walk alongside me, I could hold her in my arms, whatever it takes. I could go anywhere in the world with this cat if it was more like a dog, right? If it more just like came along with me. Because what is the strength? What is the refuge? If she's just with me, that owl's not going to mess with her. But instead, she's looking for the refuge in the solar panels, right? I tell you that story, it's such a vivid picture of my life. And maybe your life too. Well, we have so many things that we run to. We think they're great refuges, but really we got to come out and face tomorrow still. And it didn't fix anything. We're back in the same spot. The danger is still there. The pain is still there. And Jesus saying, come, run to me. Hide yourself in me. Find salvation in me, but then walk with me. He doesn't let go of you. He's the refuge, but it's a walking refuge. It's a moving refuge. It's a refuge that takes you into every single nook and cranny of your life. There's no private room that he doesn't walk in there with you. There's no situation where you're just like, I can't face that. I can't do it. I can't get through it. He's like, I'm right here. Run to me. Taste my goodness. This is how this works. He's the only refuge that walks with you. He's the only refuge that won't steal from you. All the other refuges, the little solar panel things, they'll take from you. He's the only refuge that ministers to you. All the other little refuges that are going to constantly hurt you. He's the only refuge that won't collapse and leak like the other ones. He's the only refuge that sets you free. And he'll make your face radiant. So we run to something more true, and then we walk with him. We walk with him. Well, where do we go from here? Well, in close, I want to give you just 4 steps. Real quick, 4 steps. Number 1, cry out to God. Cry out to God. If you see in verses 4 and 6, again, he's crying out to God. I'm saying this because I don't know how many of us, when we're at the bottom, we even do that. He's listening to your cries. I mean, famously, St. Augustine, who struggled with addiction to sexual promiscuity and lust, he famously wrote his prayer, which is so vulnerable of him to do. As I prayed to you for the gift of chastity, he prays to God for chastity. I had even pleaded, God, grant me chastity and self-control, but please not yet. He says, I was afraid that you might hear me immediately and I'd be healed. It's kind of like what St. Ignatius said, it's impossible to be free from sin until you hate sin. If you love it, you're never going to be free from it. So you're crying out to God. 2, give God the master key. Give God the master key. Again, we see this in verses 7, 9, 11. This is lordship. This is worship sort of stuff we're talking about here. Basically, choose your God. Choose your God. Who are you going to fear? I mean, some of you have accepted Jesus and you've simultaneously rejected him. What I'm saying, it's like when you go to somebody's house, maybe you've never been to someone's house before, and you walk in and they go, yeah, here's our family room, and here's our kitchen, and here's the guest bathroom, and you just walk in, and you're like, oh yeah, this is great. But then maybe they take you upstairs and they go, here's this bedroom, and here's my bedroom, and you just kind of go, oh cool, and you never walk in there, do you? Right? Because you're like, that'd be weird if you just walked in and sat on the bed, and you're like, this is nice. Like you would never do that, would you? Right? Because that's a private space. There are spaces we let people come into, and we're like, this is good for you. You can do whatever you want in this room, right? But you can't go in there, right? We do the same thing with God. Many of us have accepted Jesus in our minds. We've received him. We've just asked him to come into the family room and be our janitor. We say my bathroom, my bedroom, that's mine. What I'm saying is, give him the master key, right? Give him the master key. He wants the master key. Say to Jesus, I want to fear you. You're Lord of my life in every area. There's nothing you can't touch. Right? Until you get there, you will never be free. Until you actually want this. Number 3, behold the power of God. I don't know if you noticed it, but the word deliver, save, redeem comes up 7 times in this psalm. Verse 4, 6, 7, 17, 18, 19, 22. What I'm saying is God saves people. He really does deliver people. He can deliver you. Do you believe that? Behold his power. right? You might be thinking, this isn't possible for somebody like me, or it's not possible for somebody like them, but this is what God does. This is like his thing. This is what is happening in the world. He saves people, and he could save you too. He could save that person that you've given up on, right? So we have to behold the power of God, and we need to share those stories of how he's worked in our lives. Maybe some of you have experienced deliverance in some way, but you've kept it quiet. Sharing about the power of God in your life could be the very thing that encourages and emboldens somebody else. Number 4, find community that will point you to God. I land here because this is so important in so many practical ways that we don't have time to get into, but this is how the psalmist begins. He has experienced deliverance, and now he's saying, join me. Let's form a community that worships, exalts, boasts in this saving God who delivers us. Let's join together. I mean, Tim Keller said you could to take someone out of slavery takes an instant, but to take the slavery out of someone can take a lifetime. And that's true. So we need our community. We need each other. We need each other. We need people to point us to Jesus saying, go to him, run to him. Because only he can give you the comfort that no amount of alcohol can bring you. Only he can give you the joy that no amount of entertainment can provide you. Only he can give you the intimacy that no amount of pornography can sustain you with. Only he can give you the security that no amount of success can give. Only he can give you the value that no other amount of power can create. And all that he requires is that you're hungry. That's it. That you would come to him and taste. That you worship your way out. Let's all bow our heads as we go into our time of prayer and response. Let's just take this moment here to give you a moment just to be quiet before God and just bring your heart and your cares to him. Father, I pray this morning for our church here. Lord, for anybody in this room, Lord, who you brought here to this place. Lord, you see all things. We cannot hide anything from you. And so I ask this morning, God, that you would speak and that you would heal, that you would rescue, that you will set free people all over this room. God, I pray that we would be a church that is a beacon of hope and light, that just is constantly tasting your goodness, that walks in the fear of you, that worships you in public and in private. God, would you form us into a church like that? We pray. Help us to encourage one another just to run to you as our refuge, as our shelter, to walk with you, Lord, all our days. Lord, I pray for anything that needs to be confessed, anything that needs to be brought out, anything that people need help in and support in, that you would surround us with people we could talk to this morning, that we could share with, that would walk with us, that would pray with us. Lord Jesus, thank you for the cross. We ask these things in your name. Amen.